As a young officer, he saw combat in North Africa and Europe, crossing paths with figures like General George Patton and future President Harry S. Truman. In later years, as a highly decorated commander of US forces in Vietnam, he became a familiar figure on American television screens. However, his leadership would become increasingly criticized for its controversial strategy of attrition and a fixation on body count. Today, we're looking at the life, campaigns, and also the medals of US Vietnam Commander General William Westmoreland. William Charles Westmoreland was born in 1914 in Saxon in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He came from an upper-middle-class background, with his father a manager of a textile mill. His family also had banking connections. Spartanburg sounds like an interesting name, so I had to look into why it was called that. It's named after a fierce local militia, the Spartan Regiment, who helped win the pivotal Battle of Cowpens in the Revolutionary War. This being a proud Limey channel, the less said about that conflict the better. Eh, Mel? In his teenage years, Westmoreland attended the Citadel, a public military college in Charleston, for a year in 1932, and then, after getting nominated by a local senator, perhaps using family connections, attended the United States Military Academy. Westmoreland stated that he joined the army as he wanted to see the world. He received the Knox Trophy and Pershing Sword, which is awarded to the cadet with the highest military proficiency. He graduated in 1938. Commissioned as a second lieutenant, he opted for the artillery and spent time at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Here he met a Lieutenant Colonel George Patton for the first time. While stationed here, he would also meet his future wife, known as Kitsy. They would later marry after the war in 1947 and have 3 children. In 1939 he deployed to Hawaii and was promoted to First Lieutenant and Battery Commander with the 8th Field Artillery. He was then stationed at Fort Bragg, and in 1941 he met then Senator Harry Truman and gave him an artillery demonstration, inviting him to fire an artillery piece. Truman, a former artillery captain in World War I, accepted and stated that as an old artilleryman he recognised the fire mission was uncomplicated and that even so the crews had helped him hit the target. Years later, Truman would write Westmoreland a letter of encouragement when he was commanding US troops in Vietnam. Also later in 1944, interestingly, Westmoreland witnessed British Prime Minister Winston Churchill having a cheeky pee behind an outbuilding prior to a speech he would give the US soldiers of the 9th Division preparing for D-Day. He must have been caught short, I guess. In World War II, Westmoreland would serve with the 9th Infantry Division, who were known as the Old Reliables. This division was among the first US combat units to engage in offensive ground operations during World War II. His unit, the 34th Field Artillery, received a Presidential Unit Citation when fighting in Tunisia. This was a battalion of towed 155mm howitzers, and they assisted preventing a German breakthrough at the Battle of Kasserine Pass. Westmoreland would see combat in Tunisia, Sicily, France and Germany. He reached the temporary wartime rank of colonel and in October 1944 was appointed the Chief of Staff of the division and was a staff officer for the remainder of the war. In his memoirs he wrote, "Despite a number of near misses, I came through the war unscathed. In Tunisia, a shell hit my vehicle but without harm to me, and in Sicily an exploding mine blew up my vehicle, but I was thrown clear. On the Ruhr River in Germany, just as I got out my jeep and entered a company command post, a mortar shell struck my vehicle. In the Rheinmagen bridgehead on the Rhine, a shell demolished a latrine moments after I had departed. Somehow, none of the enemy's shells had my number." After peace was declared, Westmoreland, although a gunner, was given the command of an infantry unit during the Army of Occupation in Germany. Westmoreland wrote, "Russians and vodka, I soon learned, were virtually synonymous. Twice I accompanied my division commander, General Craig, with his Russian opposite beyond the Elbe. Since General Craig was an abstainer, his aides had to exercise considerable ingenuity to dispose of the vodka from his glass in nearby flower pots. The Russian general several times did the same. I noted an unwavering peculiarity about the Russians. We always had to go to them. Never would they come to visit us or even meet us halfway. Roughly over this period, Westmoreland would form a relationship with Maxwell D. Taylor, who became the divisional commander of the 101st Airborne Division in 1944. Taylor would rise far in the US military after World War II and would act as Westmoreland's patron. Taylor would also in later years, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 1962, advocate for the escalation of the conflict in Vietnam. Several weeks before General Patton died in a fatal car accident, he visited Westmoreland's headquarters in Ingolstadt. Over lunch, Patton warned Westmoreland about the media, stating, "Westy, don't forget when you return to the States, be careful what you say. No matter what, they'll put it in the newspapers." Westmoreland said it seemed remote advice at the time for a young colonel, but I was to have ample reason in later years to reflect on his counsel. In the future, although like Patton at times he would use the media for self-promotion, Westmoreland would have a tense and often adversarial relationship with the media during the Vietnam War, as journalists increasingly criticised the progress and transparency of the US military campaign. Westmoreland believed the press undermined public support and misrepresented the situation on the ground, particularly during key moments like the Tet Offensive. Keen to become a paratrooper, in 1946 Westmoreland completed training at the Army's Jump School. He then went on to command the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, later becoming Chief of Staff for the 82nd Airborne Division until 1950. After a 2-year posting as an instructor at the Army War College, in July 1952 he was transferred to the 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team in Japan and Korea and promoted to Brigadier General, aged only 38, making him one of the youngest US Army generals in the post-World War II era. This was the theatre reserve for the Korean War, and Westmoreland would spend 9 of his 15 months based in Japan and 6 months in Korea. A good example illustrating his determination of character. During this period, he wanted to be awarded a Master Parachutist badge, and during a lull period in Korea, he completed 13 jumps in one day. His unit was also awarded a Korean Presidential Unit Citation. After returning to the United States in October 1953, Westmoreland was Deputy Assistant Chief of Staff for Manpower Control on the Army Staff until 1955. Significantly, in 1954, alongside this, he also completed a 3-month management program at Harvard Business School. It stated that Westmoreland, during his 36 years in the Army, missed out on many formal instruction or educational courses other officer compatriots would have attended, such as courses at the Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth or War College. I guess his only experience of War College was as an instructor rather than a student. He would state that he was proud of this not being infected by that way of conducting affairs. Rather than intellectual thoughts, he preferred to focus on more pragmatic areas, such as administration and logistics. From 1955 until 58, he was the Army's Secretary of the General Staff. He was then assigned as commander of the 101st Airborne Division for 2 years. From 1960, he was then posted as Superintendent of the United States Military Academy for a 3-year posting until 1963. By all accounts, although a stern taskmaster, he was well thought of as a divisional commander and senior officer, especially at the 101st Airborne. Being genuinely interested in the welfare of his men, he would try various initiatives to improve their lives. This would include attempting to reduce drink driving incidents off base by introducing cheaper alcohol on site. After being deployed to Vietnam, in 1964 he became Deputy Commander of Military Assistance Command Vietnam, known as MACV, then promoted to Commander. Defence Secretary Robert McNamara informed President Johnson that Westmoreland was the best we have without question. Westmoreland's early years in Vietnam were the honeymoon period with the press. He was even named as the 1965 Time Man of the Year, and even touted as a potential candidate for the 1968 Republican presidential nomination. During Vietnam, Westmoreland was a strong advocate of the one-year tour of duty policy. He also believed in providing the best infrastructure and support for his troops. He thought that soldiers going out into the jungle would have a higher morale knowing that they could return to a base which had excellent facilities at the end of their operation. In 1965, Westmoreland requested a huge troop build-up and the introduction of a new policy based on search and destroy in a war of attrition, wearing down the enemy over time and measuring success by body count. US troops would be deployed to rural areas and engage and eliminate the enemy. Holding ground was not considered important. The US would win with overwhelming firepower and technology. It's important to state at this point, this strategy was not agreed on by all his subordinates, and they would increasingly question it as the years went by. In response to this strategy, North Vietnamese commander Vo Nguyen Diap stated, "People should not be overawed by the power of modern weapons. It is the value of human beings that will in the end decide victory." With Westmoreland's new strategy in place, focusing on improving training for the ARVN or providing them with better weapons was considered secondary. Westmoreland believed the US would be the main force that could beat the communists and then hand it over to the South Vietnamese. Focusing on pacification or winning hearts and minds would also be of secondary importance to the destruction of the enemy. Westmoreland's chief intelligence officer, General Philip Davidson, reportedly stated, "Westmoreland's interest lay in big unit war. Pacification bored him." As an early indicator of disagreement with Westmoreland's strategy, when the Australians arrived in force in 1965 to assist their US and South Vietnamese allies, after spending a few months under US command, Australian leadership vehemently disagreed with the handling of the war and demanded their own area of responsibility and autonomy. Authors and commentators have stated that the Aussies were horrified at the US casualty rates and the use of massive firepower and hardware causing collateral damage. Experienced in recent counterinsurgency campaigns in Malaysia and Borneo, Australian and New Zealand troops adopted a strategy of silent jungle patrols, attempting to surgically seek out and ambush Viet Cong lurking in the jungle and reducing collateral casualties. They would also attempt to minimise any local nationals working on their bases, seeing them as a potential security risk. The Aussies would do their own cleaning and maintenance work within the wire. In response to any challenges, Westmoreland would require more troops. When he first arrived in Vietnam, there were 16,000 US troops. By 1968, over 500,000 soldiers were in country. Although he was nicknamed Westy by his colleagues, over time some troops would refer to him disparagingly as Westmoreland. He did, though, receive praise from historians for implementing the mobile riverine force in the Mekong Delta, which was thought of as largely a success. During a visit to Vietnam by Senator Fritz Hollings from Westmoreland's home state of South Carolina, Hollings was told by the general that "we are killing these people, the enemy, at a ratio of 10-1. The senator replied, "Westy, American people don't care about the 10, but care about the 1. Commentators have claimed that Westmoreland never understood the political and psychological aspect of the war, and overestimated the US public's tolerance of friendly casualties. He was a general who believed in having a military bearing and crisp appearance at all times. He demanded his staff have equal attention to detail and appearance, and he often visited troops in the field in his immaculately pressed uniform and polished boots. Allegedly, later in his career after Vietnam, when he was chief of staff, deciding on the regulation length of a soldier's hair caused him much anguish and stress. I don't think he would have fit in the submarine service somehow. In 1967, Westmoreland went on a series of visits to the US, giving highly optimistic statements to the media, which set him up for failure when the Tet Offensive in 1968 revealed that the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong were still in a position to launch a huge offensive. Furthermore, in later years, he would be accused of massaging figures on enemy strength and organisation. After 4 years in command and humiliated by Tet, Westmoreland was replaced by General Crichton Abrams, who immediately changed US strategy to focusing on upgrading and strengthening ARVN forces and pacification, rather than the war of the big battalions. This would include focusing on villages and hamlets and attempting to root out covert enemy infrastructure. However, it is argued that by that time this was too little, too late. Speaking of his enemy, General Giap, Westmoreland wrote, "Ignoring the restrictions which the United States imposed upon itself in conducting the war in Indochina, some observers have seen in the outcome some special military genius on the side of North Vietnam. They have in large measure attributed that alleged genius to my apparent counterpart, General Giap. In reality, Giap was hardly my counterpart, for my position was never so exalted as Giap's. While he was apparently an influential member of his country's government, I was a field commander restricted to decisions and actions within the boundaries of South Vietnam, subject to the dictates of my country's government and influential in policy matters only to the extent that Washington chose to act on my recommendations." Westmoreland would spend 4 years as Chief of Staff of the US Army from 68 until 72. Upon retiring, he spent much of his time attempting to resurrect his reputation and defend his actions in Vietnam. He would also campaign for governorship of South Carolina, but lost. Westmoreland's family would also not be immune from the tragedy of the Vietnam War. Just hours after he was sworn in as Army Chief of Staff on July 7, 1968, his brother-in-law, a lieutenant colonel in the infantry, was killed when his helicopter was shot down in the Mekong Delta region. Some historians believe that Westmoreland was a self-promoter who was elevated to a position beyond his capabilities. Had he retired as a divisional commander, he would have been thought of as a competent and efficient senior officer. Before Vietnam, he led a charmed existence. Other historians argue that Westmoreland, who wanted to fight a conventional war in Vietnam, was placed in an unwinnable position and hamstrung by politicians, and that it's unfair to pin the blame on him. He was simply a victim of circumstance. Had he been allowed to invade neighbouring countries and conduct his own course of action and not micromanaged from Washington, they argue the outcome could have been different. I sometimes wonder if Westmoreland's time at Harvard Business School influenced his approach to the conduct of the war. We all know now, especially viewers who've worked in corporations, there is a huge focus on KPIs, quarterly and annual earnings, etc., as well as statistics. This, although it's commonplace now, was quite a new and novel concept, I would imagine, in the 1950s and 60s. Perhaps this focus on the quantitative outcomes of an operational war, rather than the more subtle measurements needed for counterinsurgency, influenced and impacted on his judgment. In Vietnam History, Stanley Carner, the author, noted, "Westy was a corporation executive in uniform." Westmoreland's medals have been difficult to confirm, as most up-to-date pictures of him have his ribbon bar covered by his collar, so I will just show those here that I can make out and not try to speculate. It's highly likely that there are other decorations out there which are not included on this list. Army Distinguished Service Medal with 3 bronze oak leaf clusters, Legion of Merit with 2 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star, Air Medal with numerous clusters, I can't make them out, American Defence Service Medal with Bronze Star, American Campaign Medal, European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with multiple service stars, World War II Victory Medal, Army of Occupation Medal with Germany clasp, National Defence Service Medal with oak leaf cluster, I guess for Korea and Vietnam, Korean Service Medal with 2 bronze stars, and a Vietnam Service Medal with multiple stars. Foreign awards include the French Legion of Honour, the Croix de Guerre with bronze palm, the Korean Order of Military Merit. From the ribbon it looks like the Chungmu version, the Korean Order of National Security Merit, the very interesting Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Holy Trinity from Ethiopia. This is likely related to the US providing training and military equipment from the late 50s, as well as in the 1960s, the US Army provided mapping for much of the country. So I guess improving bilateral relations, that kind of thing. Westmoreland then also received various awards from the Republic of Vietnam. Looks like the National Order of Vietnam Knights Grand Cross, the Republic of Vietnam Distinguished Service Order for Army, Air Force and Navy, the familiar Cross of Gallantry with Palm, Armed Forces Honour Medal First Class, Civil Actions Medal, Chung Mai Medal First Class, and then more foreign awards, the Order of Sikatuna from the Philippines, the Order of the White Elephant Knight's Cross from Thailand, the Order of Military Merit from Brazil, again I would assume that's related to bilateral relations, and the Bolivian Decoration for Military Merit. It's the Liberator Hero version for General Jose Miguel Lanza. That was a bit of a mouthful. We have the Japanese Order of the Rising Sun, the Order of the Cloud and Banner with Grand Cordon, that's from Taiwan, again likely related to fostering cooperation, United Nations Korea Medal, and last but not least, the Vietnam Campaign Medal, a very familiar medal to viewers of this channel. And not to forget his 2 unit citations, one the US Presidential Unit Citation and the other a Korean Presidential Unit Citation. Westmoreland lived to a ripe old age of 91, passing away in Charleston, South Carolina in 2005. He is buried at West Point Cemetery in a plot he picked for himself when he was superintendent. One thing does strike me. It is alleged, though I can't confirm it, that Westmoreland never studied the earlier French defeat at Dien Bien Phu or their experiences in Vietnam. If that's true, I find it incredible. Had he studied it, then Ho Chi Minh's warning to the French in 1946 may have rung in Westmoreland's ears. You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours. But even at those odds, I will win and you will lose. It would be really interesting to hear what Vietnam veterans actually think of Westmoreland, whether you believed he was a good commander or a bad commander. Was he to blame for the defeat, or was he instead constrained by politicians and given an unwinnable task in the first place? Was there another general who maybe could have won the war? Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.